Hello, this is Joe. Wanted to give a quick overview of some of the side projects I've been working on recently. Mostly that recently that's been games and working towards a reworked version of a game I've already released called Tabletop Soccer. This is the Redux version. Just going to give a quick demo of this real quick here. So yeah, this is a game I've already released, but it's been a while now, and it doesn't look as good as this. It's needs an over a good refactoring, and it has done for quite some time. And one of the main things about that game that I've wanted to change is how the networking works. So the original game was intended to be multi-platform for iOS and Android, and so I had a Java server that was the multiplayer kind of core, which allowed all the different platforms to play. But for various reasons, like as an indie dev, it's pretty difficult to keep up on all those platforms, and so I've kind of decided just to switch over to Steam as the singular platform, which means I can move over to using their Steam peer-to-peer networking, which is what this game is using. So I'm playing offline here, but this game does work with Steam peer-to-peer networking. And then there's a few other things in this game that I've kind of picked up from other projects. I'm going to give a quick overview. Some of the pathfinding, the camera, some of how the AI works. And then also just a few things I've picked up with the UI and everything. Just a couple things that I've been able to kind of figure out and make look a lot nicer than the original game. So excited to be able to eventually put a bow on the on this one and re-release that out. So one of the games that I was playing around with building up to the Tabletop Soccer Redux was this David 21 game, which was inspired by COVID-19 kind of situation. But the story's kind of by the by here. But the idea was I wanted to explore about map creation and pathfinding. And so I kind of created this David 21 thing, and it has two different modes. There's a David mode and a human mode. So I'm going to play in the David mode here and just kind of show how this works. But you can see the map is being generated procedurally, and it is based off of the random key that was passed in there. And once the town is created, the game essentially plays, in this case, like a real-time strategy game. And you have these Davids, which you can't really directly control. They actually go around and kind of do their own thing. They have a work kind of priorities list here, which allows you to control kind of what activities they're going to do. And that just divides them amongst the Davids, and they'll go from activity to activity. And the kind of story and where this was going was sort of by the by. But the thing that was interesting here was, again, around the pathfinding. And so you can see they kind of follow some pretty strict rules around trying to follow these sidewalks and the crosswalks and that kind of stuff. And then ultimately the generation of this map was interesting. And this camera, in fact, which may look familiar from the Tabletop Soccer Redux because it's exactly the same code. So going back to the map generation, I'm going to quit back out here and just create a second round. So whatever you type in here just gets used as the random key. So we'll try this out. And the other mode here was human, so I'll just show that while we're here. But you can see the idea is it generates the map randomly each time based on what you typed in, which was pretty exciting to work on. So yeah, the second mode here was this idea that you would have a human running around in this town trying to disrupt what the real-time strategy player is attempting to do, essentially. And so I kind of, one of these days, would like to come back to this. But the thing that kind of pushed me back to working on Tabletop Soccer was that the networking that I was kind of hoping to pull off here with multiple players coming in at the same time was just larger scoped than something I'd originally wanted to get into. So I kind of decided to move back to working on the Tabletop Soccer game. Another game which I was playing around with kind of leading up to Tabletop Soccer was this Subspace Brain. And so the thing that was interesting about this one was I wanted to focus on a game that did two things. One, Steam mods, so allowing users to generate their own content. And then the second thing was to be able to create like an engine or actually a series of small engines that would be something that players could easily write their own content for. So in this particular case, the engine is something you just saw there was like the text engine, which allows a very simple kind of story to be told with some, yes, no, maybe kind of options thrown in and custom dictionary values and that kind of stuff. This was the core game engine itself, which essentially just renders out various pictures, or in this case, letters and numbers of various things. And the idea being that the user just has to follow them in some sequence. And so there were kind of spelling puzzles and math puzzles and order puzzles and that kind of thing. But ultimately, the idea was to be able to get to a point where users could generate their own content. And that was the piece that kind of interested me. And so using Steam, they have Steamworks SDK. They have integration with their Steam Workshop stuff, which is pretty slick, like most of the other things that Steam put out. And so, this particular one, I ended up building this mob manager page, created an actual mod for it, which is a pretty interesting experience, building both sides of that. And you can see it listed while it's still not, public. 'Cause this is all just private stuff. You can actually see the real workshop listing here, which shows the mods that I was able to create and then upload into the game. And so what's great about that was the mods can be really simple to load in. In this case, they were just JSON files, but the mechanism through which you load those into the game at runtime allows all kinds of stuff. And one of the things I was interested in learning about this one was how I can enable users to create their own content for Tabletop Soccer, i.e. bringing in their own characters, bringing in their own backgrounds and pitches and, all that kind of stuff. So going back one game further still to this backgammon game, this was something inspired by an idea my dad had about backgammon, and there were a couple things I wanted to experiment with here. The main one was actually Steam peer-to-peer. This was the first time I'd done a direct Steam peer-to-peer game. Super simple, it's backgammon, so it's a very slow game. It's, there's not much data to move around. It's super turn-based and super slow, so it seemed like a very easy way to kind of get into that. And was able to test that out and play games with my dad, which was really the whole point. So that was great to learn how to do that. But the other thing that I kind of learned here in backgammon, kind of accidentally, but it ended up being a bit of a learning experience regarding the coding practices and the way that I approach writing games. The practices that I use in my professional life, really don't translate very well to writing games. The rules are just very different. And this was kind of one of the first times when I really just kind of essentially threw all the rules out of the window that I'd been using prior up to this point, and was really trying just completely different ways of approaching game design, which was just an interesting and fun experiment. Just going absolutely overboard with statics and all kinds of crazy stuff that normally I would avoid. So that was an interesting experiment from that perspective. All right, and the last one I'm going to show here is kind of by far the oldest one, and obviously one I put the least amount of effort into the UI and kind of made jokes about that, because I did share this with a couple of people and I wanted them to know that I know it's horrendous. But the idea here, actually, this game was inspired by a couple things. The main thing, if you can bear past the horrendous UI, was around this concept of microservices. Actually was what got me thinking about this when we were doing some stuff at work. But the idea was about how could you allow users to create content, like create really, really simple AIs that would allow them to build up some strategic difference to other players. So it's probably best demonstrated if I just show the game. So how the game works is you have these big capital ships that spawn these smaller ships, and the smaller ships will kind of go off of their own accord and just follow some directives they've been given. And that's the instructions that I'm kind of talking about. And so allowing users to control what should these small ships be focusing on. The closest thing, the most threatening thing. Do they break into groups of 3? Should they be in groups of 2? Like all kinds of just different configurations that you could do. You can also take control of these ships by hand and kind of, do your own thing. But mostly the curiosity was around how you could allow users to control that AI and more like kind of set up a battle based on paper and then just kind of let it run loose and end up seeing what's happening. So super rough implementation of that idea. But, it was a really fun concept. And there were definitely a few things I picked up from this one that I moved on with other projects too. And honestly, this will probably be something I come back to. I periodically think about how I would expand this one, and it just has some interesting potential, I think. So, but yeah, anyway, I just wanted to give a quick summary of some of those games. I'd love to hear about them, hear what you think about them, or talk about them or whatever. And thanks very much for watching and your time. Thank you.